Okay, so thank you everyone for joining the CalMoneySmart webinar. My name is Ku Lee. I'm the Director of Education Outreach for the Department of Business Oversight. Um, Joining me is Mary Audict, who is our Senior Counsel of Legal Division. She'll be helping me answer questions later on. Um, it is about 11:02, and I'm going to go ahead and get started because we have a lot of content to cover, and I want to spend a lot of time on our frequently asked questions and have an open floor discussion later on. So, if you have your microphone on, please mute for now, and then we can unmute it later when we have the open floor discussion. Also, if in Zoom there's a chat function, please feel free to use that chat function to throw in your questions and comments, and we'll address those later on. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. By the way, can everybody see my slides okay? Just let me know in the chat if you can. Um, Let me make sure here. Okay, good, excellent. So in this webinar, we're going to cover a couple different things, or actually a lot of content. The first thing we're going to do is an overview of the grant program. It'll just be real quick. And then we're going to go through the expected timeline and deadlines. And then we're going to spend the vast majority of this 1 hour webinar on the frequently asked questions, and then have an open floor discussion for any kind of additional questions or concerns you might have. Also, I'd like everybody to be muted during the webinar until we reach the open floor discussions. And if you do have any comments or questions, feel free to put it into the chat, and my team will either address it there or we'll address it at the open floor discussion. So let's do our overview of the grant program. It was created by Senate Bill 455. Here's a link to it. By the way, I'll have these slides available. I'll send it to everyone on the mailing list. So don't worry about it. The DBO will be awarding grants of up to $100,000 per approved applicants, and the maximum total amount of grant funding to be awarded every year is $1 million. Um, each fiscal year for our grants starts on July 1st and will end the following year on July 30th. And to be eligible for a grant, you have to be a nonprofit organization. Um, so one of the resources that we're using to analyze the grant proposals is the FDIC's National Survey of Unbanked and Underbanked Households. There's a link to it. I recommend checking it out. A lot of really good content. They break things down by demographics. So if you need kind of a source to help you in your proposal, it's a really good reference. Okay, so according to the legislation, there are basically 3 categories which grant funding can be used for. And I'm not gonna read this verbatim, but I'm gonna summarize it for you. This language is taken directly from the legislation. We have it in the application, and it's also on the website. So you could lots of places where you could reference it. But essentially, the first category talks about classroom or web-based using the grant funding to create classroom or web-based financial education and empowerment content. The second category is to use grant funding to create financial coaching or training. And then the third category is to use grant funding to develop a financial product or service. All of this is to be focused on unbanked and underbanked communities. And we recommend doing just one of these categories. We've had questions where people ask whether they should do all 3 or they want to do 2 of them. And again, with limited funding and especially limited time to implement your programs or proposed programs, we recommend just selecting one of these categories and going forward. There are also additional program requirements, but those are all listed on the application and also on the website. So let's go through the expected timeline and deadlines. Changes to any of these milestones will be posted on the CalMoneySmart webpage and also sent through the email newsletter. So if there's any kind of updates or changes, we'll be sure to let everyone know. So May 19th is when we officially launched our grant program. July 3rd is the deadline to submit your grant applications. And then any applications submitted after July 3rd, I think there's a 5 p.m. Pacific time deadline to submit it as well. Anything submitted after that will not be considered. And remember, all the applications have to be emailed to our CalMoneySmart at dbo.ca.gov email address. So all of them goes through that email address. Your application, your attachments, everything. August 21st is when we anticipate we'll be able to have gone through all the applications, and then we should be able to notify the selected grantees or the grant proposals. And then we're going to give them another week to sign a bunch of documents. These are just basic state documents that we need them to do. And then by September 21st is when we expect to disperse the grant funding. All right. So we need your feedback. Here is a link to a survey. Basically, there's 4 questions on this survey, and it's going to help us determine where the money may be spent, kind of the general interest level, if you're going to submit an application. And also, we've had quite a lot of requests for us to share our email list of nonprofits to everyone. Now, I don't want to do that until I get kind of a confirmation from you. So if you do this survey for us, you can also enter in your email address and your name, maybe your organization, and then we could share that email list with everybody else. But if you don't want your organization or your information shared, we'll make sure to omit you from that list. So again, you feel free to take this survey now. Again, it's just a quick 4 questions. Or you could take it later after this webinar. So here's the link to it, and please help us out in getting your feedback. Okay, so finally we're into the frequently asked questions. Again, I really want to spend the vast majority of this webinar on the FAQs, and then also on the open floor discussion, as I'm sure a lot of you have questions. And a lot of questions about the application and the process. So the first question is, can grant funding be used for incentives? I think they mean financial incentives. No. So we talked about the 3 different categories which you could use grant funding for. Financial incentives are not one of them. Now, marketing material might be something different, right? Let's say you created some kind of training and you want to create brochures or something. I don't think that's going to be a problem, but actual financial incentives to do the training or whatever program you have, probably not going to be allowed. Can funding be used for education training of local small businesses? So yes, as long as the focus of the education and training is for unbanked and underbanked communities. So this was one of the very first questions that we got. I don't want to dive too deep into this because it was kind of a specific question, but if you have a local small businesses that don't use banks or don't have an idea how to use banks, or I guess they're not, or they may be underbanked, and you want to create some kind of program to help educate them, yes, you can submit a proposal for that, and if it has a lot of really good data behind it, we would definitely consider it. So are grants reviewed on a rolling first come basis? Okay, so all grants that are submitted will be reviewed. However, the process is going to go like this. The first thing we do is review each application for eligibility, right? So is the application filled completely, answer all the questions, signatures? Does it have all the correct documentation? And then once it's eligible, then we score the proposal for the quality and effectiveness. And if all scores are equal, then after that we rank the proposals by the time of submission. So we recommend you submit as soon as possible, but make sure your application is complete as well. Okay, so this is a big question, everybody. We've been getting a lot of certificates of good standing. How recent should these be, and where can you get these? So Certificates of good standing must be current, in compliance, um, within 45 days of July 3rd, which is the deadline of application submission, is what we prefer. And then here's a link to a form requesting your certificate of good standing. It comes from the Secretary of State. Um, the only caveat here is I recommend you do this as soon as possible, only because from the real basic research I've looked at, there's a bit of a time delay from when you submit a request for a certificate of good standing and when they actually send it to you. I think it's about 2 weeks. It takes about 2 weeks to get it to you. So try to get this done as soon as possible because the deadline is basically a month away. And we could talk more about this in the open discussion if you have more questions. Okay, so on the grant application, basically questions 9 and 10 is about certificates of good standing. You want clarification on this. Okay, so on questions 9 and 10, and I could bring up the application here in a second to go through it, but basically question 9 basically says, I believe it's about, question 9 is about certificates of good standing for state of origin, and then question 10, I believe, is for California. Now, for you nonprofits who only operate in state of California, you don't need to worry about this. You'll just need one certificate of good standing, and it'll be for the state of California. But national nonprofits who have local chapters who are submitting an application for grant funding will likely need a certificate of good standing in the state that they operate in, as well as one for the local chapter that is doing the application or going to do the proposed program. Again, we could get deeper into this particular question because there's a lot of specifics that might be involved, but this is kind of a general broad answer to it. Okay, so this is another question we get a lot of. What documentation to provide proof of for the applicants? This is questions that, two different questions, I believe, that is on the application. So you need proof that applicant conducts its activities in a manner that serves public or charitable purposes. And also you need proof of documentation that applicant's net earnings does not benefit a private shareholder or individual. So I'm not going to read this verbatim. Again, I'm going to make these slides available, but I'll kind of summarize. Basically, if you're a nonprofit, you should have corporate governance documents and a tax exempt documentation. So articles of incorporation and bylaws should be enough. And also your 503C letter from the IRS confirming your nonprofit status should be enough to satisfy those two application questions as documentation proof. Again, we can get deeper into this if this is kind of a really big concern everybody has. We can kind of go deeper into it. We can provide more information. Also, on our website, we have a frequently asked questions section. I'll be posting all these answers to that webpage right after this. And then I'm going to, there's an email address that's calmoneysmart@dbo.ca.gov. If you have more specifics that you want to get into, please feel free to email us and then we'll address your specific situation. Okay, so question 7, since funding will not be dispersed until September 21st, can we implement basically later? Yes, you can. So next year we plan to start the application process sooner so that we can match our July 1st fiscal year and also a disbursement date. But this year is a little bit weird because we weren't going to be able to get funding until July 1st. And so we didn't have the resources to get the program started. So long story short, yes, you can have your program, whatever proposed program, start later. I don't think I advise is not to start too late because one of the requirements of the grant program is that you report. You have a end of year reports, and we're still developing the template for that. But the end of year report is basically going to say how you're using the money, how effective it is. And if you don't start your program until next year, then it's going to look bad on your report. So yes, you can start implementation later on in this year. Is a 2-page limit stated on the application for page 4, each question? Okay, yes. So if you've seen the application, there is for each question on page 4, you could use a separate document to answer it. Each question can have only a maximum of 2-page response. Anything more causes a really it'll take us a really long time to go through each application. So we limited it to 2 pages, but basically, yes, each response is allowed a maximum of 2 pages. Can a nonprofit submit a new application each year to continue their program if awarded? So technical answer is yes. You're allowed to submit a new application every year, and it could be to continue funding for your program. However, there's no guarantee that we'll approve your application for your second year or even your third year, because the application pool is likely to change year to year, and we're also going to judge your program based on its effectiveness year to year. And that's part of that reporting process. We're going to look at how you're spending your money and then how effective it is. And we're also going to gauge that against the new proposals that get submitted. So yes, you can submit an application to try to continue your program forward, but again, there's no guarantee that we will approve your application every year. Okay, so we had some questions that were emailed to us prior to the webinar. I'm going to just fly through this. That gives us a really good almost 30 minutes to do the open floor discussion. Okay, so given the budget shortfall, what is the best guess of chances the funding is approved? Okay, so it is highly likely that CalMoneySmart funding is going to make it into the final budget. I'd say about 90% it's going to get approved. We've been going back and forth with our agency and then the higher ups, and they've pretty much green-lighted everything. So they're very, very confident that funding will happen for this program. But we'll definitely keep updates to come, which will be posted on the website as well as through our email newsletter. So assuming you receive more qualified applicants than available funds, what do you expect the average probably grant size be? So it really depends on a lot of different factors. I estimate, based on the couple of applications that have already been submitted, we'll probably award between 60,000 to 100,000. I suspect everybody's going to ask for the maximum amount, which is 100,000. But I'm giving a range, again, based on the very few applications that have already been submitted. And there's also a lot of different factors, but I think this next question will kind of answer that. How many grants do you expect to award, and will grants amount be reduced? So again, based on the $60,000 to $100,000 range of funds we will approve or will award, I'm expecting anywhere between 10 to 15 grants, but grant amounts will not be reduced. So we're not going to try to get you to revise your grant or even cut grant funding based on the amount of applications we see. Basically, we're going to do the best we can to make our $1 million grant funding, and we don't have any plans to reduce the grant amounts that are proposed. Basically, we don't want to modify your proposal, and we're just going to approve the proposals that we think are best. Okay, so open floor for questions. So right now, well, there's one that was submitted through the chat. Let me read it real quick. Is CalMoneySmart in partnership with the FDIC? MoneySmart. So no, but so technical answer is no. I am actually a really good friend with the FDIC, what do you call it, coordinator here in Sacramento. And we know each other, we work with each other, but our program is not the same as their program. I know the Money Smart thing sounds the same, but it's two different programs. This is completely separate from the FDIC, but we are using their report because their report is excellent. So here's another question that was submitted. What do you expect in the business plan? Question 15. What do we expect in the business plan? I want to say in the business plan, it's just a general business plan. I don't want to go too deep into it. It's kind of an open-ended question. We just expect a business plan, right? For question 15 of the application. Let me see if I could pull up real quick. Yeah, we're requiring that you submit a business plan with your application. It's just a general business plan. Most organizations should have a business plan, so it shouldn't be too much of an issue. But the business plan should just be, like I said, just a basic business plan. Let's see here. Is there any other questions? You can submit it through the chat and I'll read it here, or if you want to unmute yourself, you're free to do that as well, and we'll answer it. Again, assisting me is our senior counsel, Mary Audick, and if there's any real technical questions, we can jump into those to try to answer that as well.
I have a quick question, if that's okay. My name is Raphael.
Yeah, go ahead.
Nice to meet you and all of you. So if we're a financial institution and we already have a financial education program in place, which means I'm basically to spearhead the program, and I go out and I teach financial education to nonprofits, local high schools, anywhere that we feel can use it. It's normally in underbanked communities or non-bank communities, and low income to moderate income communities as well. So I'm just wondering if that is that still qualify for being able to try to get a grant to maybe make our program more robust? It's just me doing it, and where there's really no marketing involved with our financial education program, except for just mentioning it on our website, etc. So I'm just wondering, like, how the money could be allocated if we do qualify towards helping our community, have more financial education opportunities out there. Since I've noticed it's really difficult to spark interest in the community in general. So I don't know why it seems like a lot of people kind of steer clear of going to a financial education webinar or workshop, and I've noticed that a lot. So I don't really think it has anything to do with the presenter. I think it's just a lot of people either believe that they already have a good handle on their, financial literacy skills, or they're just not interested because, maybe they have other things to do. So I know it's kind of, I'm just going off on a tangent here, but so just a lot of things going on in my mind, but just wondering, is there a way that we can help our communities and that money used in order to make it more robust? I think the most important thing is to be able to empower our communities in order to.
Who's calling, please?
Yeah, sorry about that. Continue, please.
Yeah, I'm sorry. In order to be able to, really make the financial education effective, I think it's really important. I'm really passionate about this topic. I'm really passionate about teaching, and I've been teaching for over 20 years now. I'm actually an educator. So I really would like the opportunity to know how we can get this program, financial education program in general out there and spark interest in the audience. And if this grant will help to do that, or if you have any suggestions at all.
Sorry. Well, so in general, can you hear me? Sorry.
Yes, thank you.
Problems. Okay. So in general, I think the intention of the grant, again, when you think about the three different categories which you're allowed to use grant funding for, is to kind of understand your particular program. And perhaps there are other nonprofits out there who have their programs that they might be doing different things, and this is a chance for them to assist in doing assisting these unbanked and underbanked communities So when you look at this again, I'm sorry, this is the wrong slide. Basically the three different categories which you can use money for, and like you said, you have a program already, which you're doing financial education and you're doing for these underbanked and unbanked communities. And maybe you want to develop some free financial coaching, or maybe a tool, right? So when we look at financial product or service, it could be a tool that's going to cost you money because you have to hire like a developer or something, or maybe outsource a developer to create calculators for your website or something. These could be part of ways that you could use the money to help augment your program, and that would be part of your proposal, right? Again, there's probably a lot of nonprofits out there, and again, I haven't had a chance to look too deep into the applications that have been submitted to us so far, but the ones that I've seen are basically brand new. They're not working with unbanked or underbanked communities. It's a demographic that they want to get into, but they don't have the financial resources to get into it. And I think this is a really good way to kind of break into that, right? Whether it's just developing some marketing materials or um, developing the training to get themselves out there. It could be just creating a video to share to their community or whatnot. So I don't want to get into too many ideas. I'm sure everybody has their own proposals on what they want to use their money for. But hopefully this answers your question. Great. I'm going to read off one question we got in the chat real quick. Is submitting link for online course curriculum mandatory, or can we send class-based course curriculum? So submitting a link is not mandatory. If you have a link of your online course curriculum, that's great. It would help us out. It will also save on paperwork, so you don't have to dump all your stuff to us. But you can also send us your class-based course curriculum, right? Whatever training curriculum or regimen you have, you can send it to us as well. So you don't need to submit it through you don't have to submit a link, especially if you don't have an online link. I'm gonna answer one more question in the chat, and then we'll go into more open discussion. So for application question 23, please attach all available proposed curriculum for in-classroom courses. So should we submit handouts for financial coaching application? I want to say yes. If you are developing a financial coaching, then you should probably have some type of outline. And I think that's what it is. That basically, please attach all available proposed curricula and handouts for classroom courses. It's more of a general, very blanket statement saying, hey, if you're going to develop some kind of training or coaching program, we want to see your outline of it, right? We want to see the general, curriculum you plan to be training or coaching people on, just so that we make sure it fits the different program requirements. Okay. Let's open it up a little bit. So feel free to ask a question, anybody. So if nobody's going to ask a question, I'm going to read another one submitted through chat. Can an organization submit multiple applications for different locations? So this is a question that was submitted to us, but it was very specific. Technical answer is maybe. Actually, it's more. There's a lot of technical things into it. So I'll give you kind of an example. Let's say there's a national nonprofit that wants to submit an application, and they have local chapters in Sacramento and Los Angeles. Now, if the national chapter wants to submit an application for both of those, both of those chapters, that's perfectly fine. But the maximum grant amount for that application is $100,000. So how they decide to locate those $100,000 per their chapters is up to that program, up to that nonprofit. But let's say you're a national program, national nonprofit, you have chapters in Sacramento and LA, and each one want to submit their own applications. Again, they're welcome to. Those chapters, as long as they operate kind of separately and on their own, and they have their own grant program that their own proposal that they want to implement, they can submit their own applications, and then each one would be eligible for the $100,000 grant, or up to $100,000 grant. So again, it's kind of a more technical question, but I want to say maybe it depends on what your intentions are. Let's see here. We have another question in the chat. Let's see. Considering the situation, can we propose to offer the workshops and coaching online until the situation gets back to normal? Absolutely. If you want to do online coaching, Zoom meetings, training, and all that, we're all for it. I think, yeah, I don't think we'll have a problem with that. Again, it's all about the curriculum which you plan to teach, and as long as it meets our program requirements, I don't think that's going to be a problem. Okay. Is there any other questions? Let's see. We don't have a strategic plan in place. How important is it to submit the business plan? So the business plan is a requirement of the application. And again, so I have an MBA, and we had to write a business plan for my master's project. It's an undertaking. So I can understand how difficult it would be to build a business plan. And to do it in 30 days is going to be a bit of an undertaking. But again, it is part of the application. And one of the reasons why we have it, so it's basically one of the required documents that must be attached. It's number 15 on page 6 if you're looking at it, most recent business plan. So yeah, it's basically a requirement. I would say you could build a business plan in 30 days. It's going to be a little bit rough, and you're going to cut a lot of corners, but you could definitely do it. And I think it'll pretty much help us determine how legitimate of an organization you are, because the business plan has a lot of things besides just what's your mission statement, what's your vision statement type of thing. It's going to tell us how your organization is set up, and how your funding is currently done, budgets, that kind of stuff. So a business plan will actually meet a lot of these application document requirements already. Hold on, I'm going to read some responses here real quick. How long should a business plan be? Is a strategic plan same as a business plan? So a strategic plan and a business plan is not necessarily the same, but they could be the same. If you've ever done a business plan, it's basically, it's just basically kind of, so a strategic plan would be more like a 3-5 year plan type of thing. And it just kind of more describes your organization in terms of what your objectives and goals are and how you're going to achieve that, right? That's kind of your strategic plan. A business plan, on the other hand, basically gives a little more outline in terms of, again, your leadership structure, funding, how you use your money, and that kind of a thing. So I would say the business plan can encompass a strategic plan. It could have a strategic plan within it. So I hope that answers that question. I don't want to dive too deep into some MBA type of course material. Okay, so let's see here. One grant to provide funding to LA and Orange County is correct. So I'm assuming you're saying, can one grant provide funding to LA and Orange County? So again, this is very proposal specific. You could make a proposal. You could submit a proposal to do, to take grant funding and do financial education throughout the entire state of California, right? Or you could narrow your focus to, cities, LA, or even counties, LA or Orange County. It's completely up to you, and it's part of your proposal on how you're going to use the money and how it's going to be effective and all that kind of good stuff. So one organization I would highly recommend, if you're an organization, you only submit one application and not multiple applications. although there are no very, and Mary, feel free to jump in on this, but I don't think there's any restriction on how many applications a single organization can submit, but I don't think we'll be awarding, it's highly, highly, highly unlikely that we'll be awarding multiple grants to a single organization. Um, Probably only,
Correct.
yeah. Um, so I hope that answers that question. You could have one grant, yes, you could have one grant funding or one grant application proposed using funding for LA and Orange County. Let's see here. If your program is delivered online, are you still limited to the 15% threshold for information technology expenses, or would IT expenses qualify as program costs? Okay, so this goes into the administrative cost, and this is part of the legislative requirements, that basically no more than 15% of the grant funding that you're awarded be used towards administrative costs. And we have kind of the answer on our FAQ on our website, but essentially, if your program is delivering your material, your, let's say, training or whatever implement program online, are you still limited to 15% threshold? Yes. The question is how you're going to account for your 15% administrative cost. So you have to also take into account what you generally have. Let's say you already have an internet provided to you, you have computers and other resources already there. Um, you can't really use that as your administrative cost because you already have it. But let's just assume that you need to, pay for hosting, right? You want to buy a domain name, you want to pay for hosting. That could be part of that administrative cost. If you're going to build like a website or maybe some online tools, and it's going to require some additional, I would say, programming or maybe some online resources that you have to purchase, that would be part of that administrative cost. There's a slight more details on our website, on our FAQ section. And if you do have very specific details, feel free to email us and we can address those individually. Um, let's see, where's planning to offer classes in different, okay, so we are planning to offer classes in different languages. Does the lesson plan for all languages need to be submitted? Um, does the lesson plan for all languages need to be submitted? I don't think you need to go too deep into the detail unless you want to, but I don't recommend it. Do you need to submit the different languages? No. English is perfectly fine. And if you say you're going to have your lesson plan in, Tagalog or Chinese or Spanish, that's perfectly fine. We'll assume that you're going to do that. That'll all be part of your reporting at the end of the year. But yeah, if you just submit your lesson plan in English, that's perfectly fine. And then just notate that you'll have additional languages there. Is the intent of this grant to fund new programs and or program expansions? Do you anticipate applications that are requesting funding for ongoing program support to be competitive? So is this grant to fund new programs or program expansions and or expansions? I would say yes to both. The intention of the program is, this grant program is to basically fund, or to build that financial education and awareness to unbanked and underbanked communities. So whether you already have an existing program, but let's say you need more tools or you want to expand your ability to get to different markets or bigger audiences, that'll be part of your proposal, right? If you want to create a new program, you don't necessarily work with underbanked or unbanked communities, but you want to, and you want to create a new program for that, that'll be a new proposal. And I'd say both. The intent of this grant is to serve both functions. There's nothing in the legislative mandate that says it has to be new program or it has to be just for expanding. We're willing to facilitate both. It all depends on the quality of your proposal and also kind of the documentation you provide us. Do you anticipate applications that are requesting funding for ongoing programs to be competitive? Yes, it depends on your application, but yes. Let's say you're doing a lot of financial education for Spanish speaking communities, but you don't have any online tools in Spanish. You don't have any online tools in Spanish to show them how banking can help them, right? And you want to develop that. That would be part of that would be kind of an expansion to your Spanish speaking financial education, and it's focused towards unbanked communities. And then your online tools could help augment your other program. And as long as you provide that kind of documentation and proof that this program can help unbanked and underbanked communities, I think it'd be very competitive. Um, do programs for teens qualify or only adults? So if you look at the FDIC report, for national unbanked and underbanked communities, it has a breakdown of the different demographics. Teens are there and they do qualify, and they are to a degree or more one of those unbanked uh, communities or demographics. But you also have to understand that most teens who are not, let's say they're under 18, they have to, so most teens under 18 have to have a cosigner for a banked account, so it kind of skews the data. If you could provide an application that basically documents that, hey, we're looking at risk youth who are part of this demographic, that going on to adulthood, let's say they're under 18 but going on to adulthood, they don't have a chance to work with banks, and that's what our program's going to be for. I think that's a very good and competitive application that you can submit. But to answer your question, do programs for teens qualify? Yes. Um, can any part of the funds be used as a match for savings, like a one-to-one match for a savings account, to encourage savings behavior? So the answer is no. This is basically considered a financial incentive. And personally, I really like the idea, but the legislation does not allow for this. Basically, there are only three categories where you could use the money for, and a lot of it focuses purely on financial education, right? So building a financial education program, training, or a product or service to help those unbanked communities, but not like incentivization, financial incentivization, incentivization to open bank accounts. That's not the intent of this grant program. So is there any other questions? We still have plenty of time. Feel free to shoot them out there. Okay, so I'll roll through this real quick. So again, remember to take our feedback survey if you can. We could still, let me check the chat, and there's no more questions here. There was a lot of people that registered. So it's a pretty good list of individuals I've seen basically register for this webinar. So there's a lot of interest, but I'd like you to please make sure you take this survey for us so we can understand where the money is going to go. My leadership has made it very clear that if we don't either get enough applications, or if the money seems to skew in certain geographic areas, that we may extend the deadline a little bit to try to get more applications in. So that's all part of the survey. Once I get this survey, I have to compile the results and then provide it to our commissioner, and he's going to make that kind of decision. Let's see here. So we're still in the open discussions. Is there any other questions? It is 11:46, 15 minutes ahead about. I'm free to answer any questions. Also, if you do have any questions, feel free. I'm going to type in our email address here. Oh, yeah, let me send this survey link right here. Sorry. Here it is. So, survey link. any problems with that link, if it doesn't work or anything, and we can definitely check on what's causing that issue. Okay, and then here's a link. Here's an email address. If you have questions, you can submit to us. You could submit your specific questions to us, or if you have additional questions. Also, this is the same email address which we're accepting applications. Where are the files available that participants are referencing? Oh, let's go ahead and go to the website. So dbo.ca.gov/CalMoneySmart. Can you all see the application real quick? We'll just kind of go over this real fast. So this is the website. Make sure I'm sharing correctly here. Good. So this is the web page for CalMoneySmart. The application is right here, grant application. So if I click on it, we'll go to the grant application real quick. So this is kind of just a general overview. Again, we give a link. We provide a link to the FDIC report right here, so you could always look at it there. So these are all just kind of informational stuff. The application actually starts right here on page 5.
So some of the questions that people are asking are things like, you can understand from the applicant's side of the organization. Two, should we be saying, so
Sorry. Sorry, I think we were having like some audio problems, but I muted some people. Any questions here? All beneficiaries, unbanked or underbanked? Okay, so that's completely up to you on how you qualify your beneficiaries as underbanked and underbanked. You'll need to provide that kind of data for us. Because we don't have that kind of data. Now, one of the things we're using as a reference is that FDIC report, and they have a breakdown of demographics, and I believe they even have a breakdown of the different, I don't want to say cities, but it's counties. So they have a population breakdown of counties, and then there's like an estimated number of individuals they believe that are underbanked in a certain demographic. So if you're going to target individuals, you could use that report as kind of your data source. It's also possible that maybe you've done surveys of your constituency, right? So your individuals, and know that there's a population that is unbanked or underbanked. So again, that data is up to you to provide to us, and that would be something that you'd have to quantify for us in your application and your proposal. Do you accept a letter of support from other organization to testify the eligibility of the applicant? That is a good question. Mary, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, I don't really understand the question, to be honest with you. I think I need further clarification.
Yeah, a letter of support from other organization to testify the eligibility of the applicant.
Can you explain that further, please?
Oh, hi, sure. That question was from me. Usually when we submit a grant application, sometimes the grant making organization require us to get letter of support from other organization testifying about the services that the organization has been providing to the community, or if they know about the organization or about the past experiences of the services.
Well, I think any of that would be helpful. And in fact, part of the application, we do ask that you submit all data that you may have proving the efficacy of your program, your proposal. So that can only help, but it cannot be used in lieu of other application requirements. So if you want to submit all the application requirements plus additional information further supporting your proposal and your claim that it is very efficient and should be selected, please obviously feel free to do so. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep, and so we still have 5 minutes left, so please feel free to submit your questions in the group chat. I'll try to answer as best as I can. Again, we have our senior legal counsel here, Mary Oddick, who is assisting me in answering these questions. I'm gonna And then I think we had a request to kind of just look over some of the questions. Okay, so someone's asking, will this recording of this webinar be made available? Yes. So I'm going to have to run it by my leadership first, but I don't think there's going to be a problem. Yes, so the slides to this webinar, as well as the webinar recording, will be made available, and we'll likely post it onto the web page of the web page of the CalMoneySmart. Okay, so I think one of the questions that someone was asking is, let's take a look here. We have a lot of questions on the application, and again, we're basically asking a maximum of 2 pages for these questions. So you could answer these on a separate page, but use no more than 2 pages per question. Otherwise, again, your grant application could be just enormous. Okay, is there any other questions? We got about 3 minutes left. Last chance. Also, we have another webinar for Thursday. If you do have any questions that you come up with in the next couple days, feel free to jump into that webinar as well. I think we have something like 30 people registered, so still plenty of room. Feel free to jump into that one. You could email us and I could send you the link to that webinar, and you could just jump in and go through the whole thing. You could even jump in at the end where we talk about the FAQs and the open discussion, and you could put in your question there. We again, yes, we'll try to make this webinar available on the webpage. If you've signed up for our newsletter, we will be sending out, I'm not going to say weekly, but it's going to be at least bi-weekly updates about the grant program, just kind of reminders. And also we're going to update the FAQ section with all your great questions and some of your answers. So again, thank you everyone for joining the webinar. Really appreciate you taking interest into this grant program. This is our first ever grant program for the Department of Business Oversight, and we're really excited to see that there's so much engagement and so much interest in it. So thank you again, and please be safe out there, and we look forward to seeing your grant applications. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.